Coming up, on this week's episode of TechSNAP, researchers develop a way to extract data from a computer network using an ultrasonic mesh network. Feedly and Evernote get attacked, and then there's something amiss with Windows 7. Then it's a great big batch of your questions, our answers, and a heck of a lot more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 166 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on June 12th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, Ting, DigitalOcean, and IXsystems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on our live stream. Why, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, man. Welcome to episode 166, and I already know not to ask. You don't care about E3 at all. It's cool, Alan. I want to talk about video games, but I guess instead we'll have to talk about like security and systems and networking and administration stuff, I suppose.
Yep.
Well, somehow I'll manage, because our first story particularly piques my interest, and we got a big show, but out of all of the headlines, this one said something about ultrasonic networks and like a mesh network, and I thought, this is definitely a TechSNAP story, so is this where we start, Alan?
Yes. This one's about exfiltrating data from secure networks using an ultrasonic mesh network.
Well, there you go. Of course it is.
So researchers at the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany have developed a protocol based on underwater communication protocols, so protocols for talking between submarines, and actually retrofitted them for use with laptop speakers and microphones.
Oh my gosh, that's cool.
So for those that don't know, the Fraunhofer Institute is famous for having invented the MP3 codec and was also a significant contributor to H.264 and MPEG-4 AVC, which is what we use for this show. So they've issued a paper that describes a covert channel that can be used to circumvent firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, and all types of network security, basically.
This is basically to bypass an air gap, maybe? That we don't, if you can communicate via microphone and speaker? Okay.
Yeah. So it'll work across an air gap as well, but even just regular network where it's all firewalled off or whatever.
Okay.
So normally, if you have a secure system, you would air gap it, or you would put it up on a network where it could only access certain parts of the internet, or only connections that are specifically blessed could get out, and anything else would set off an alarm. So if you manage to install a keylogger on that machine, you don't want to then have it connect out to your website to send you the keylog, because then people would then the intrusion prevention system might detect it and you would get caught, and that's not what you want.
Right.
Or the system's air gapped and there's no other way out. So what they've come up with is an ultrasonic sound that would be emitted by the laptop speakers and then received by the microphone in another laptop that was also infected. And then they could just keep hopping across laptops until eventually they got, to an outside wall where someone outside the building could maybe pick up the signal.
Right, and then pass it to some other kind of
or
connection.
Even just, if it's an air gap, just get onto the regular network and then pass out or whatever. So with what they've designed so far, it has a range of up to about 20 meters, which is quite far. That's, I don't know how many feet that is, but anyway. And the bandwidth is pretty abysmal, though, at 20 bits per second.
Well, I guess it depends on what you need to send. That's pretty bad, though.
Well, if the data's so secret that it's on an air-gapped machine, you want it at whatever cost.
Yeah,
so,
you'll take it. You'll just maybe it's just text. You can get yes and no type things if at worst case.
Yeah, or if you have the 8 hours at night when no one's around to copy the data, you can start.
Well, and if it's ultrasonic, then it could be going on during the day and nobody would even hear it, right? So.
Yes. So the proof of concept was created by installing a keylogger on a laptop. For their experiment, they used Lenovo T400 laptops, which are quite old by standards now. So I imagine it's because they could get a bunch of them for cheap or whatever. But so then they put the keylogger on the victim laptop, and then the keylogger included software that would make it send out or emit the ultrasonic sounds, which are inaudible to the human ear. You can't hear them. And then that would be picked up by other infected machines using their microphone and then repeated later out of their speakers and then picked up by the next laptop and so on and so on. allowing them to extend the transmission range so they could get outside of the secure area. The locked room or the building that you're not allowed inside of or whatever.
Am I remembering correctly that there was some speculation that perhaps Stuxnet used some sort of audio transmission technique to spread from one machine to another? Does that ring a bell to you at all?
I remember hearing that.
Okay.
I've heard talk about stuff like that. Reading monitors through walls.
It might have just been speculation.
But that's possible. But I'm pretty sure that Stuxnet was carried in on a USB stick.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one that's in the open for everybody to see now.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so eventually the signal would either reach outside the protected area where it could hit a laptop that the attacker controlled and they would have their copy of the information then, or just reach a machine that's on the regular internet or whatever, and it could be retransmitted via TCP or whatever.
Right.
So the paper goes on to describe all that in great technical detail. If you're interested, it's a great read. And then they talk about the countermeasures, how they could stop this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So the easiest countermeasure would be to just disable the speaker and microphone hardware.
Yeah.
Which might make sense if it's, a super secure machine for this or that. But if you want to be able to make a Skype call from your machine or whatever.
Or listen to my MP3s.
Yeah. Although, if the machine's got super secret data on it, maybe you shouldn't be using Skype. But
yeah, tell that to the users.
Disabling the speaker and microphone entirely is not always the possible thing.
I suppose
so.
Yeah.
They then suggest maybe a low-pass filter that would just remove the ultrasonic frequencies. So it wouldn't emit the sound if you can't hear it. And so the user wouldn't notice any difference. It would just make it impossible to do these secret things.
Could you also blast a room with ultrasonic white noise to just sort of...
Possibly, yes.
Huh.
Then the other idea was just, instead of a low-pass filter, was to just shift down the ultrasonic frequencies into the audible range.
Uh-huh.
So now, if the machine ever got infected, people would hear the random screeching noises coming out of the laptop and be like, what's going on? My laptop's infected.
Well, what about using this just to allow inter-device communication over an ad hoc little mini LAN?
Then you could use regular ad hoc Wi-Fi.
I suppose so.
You wouldn't need to make it secret.
Yeah. I just like the idea of them being off my Wi-Fi, but devices still being able to communicate,
20 bits per second.
Yeah, it's not enough, is it? It'd have to be
out of your dog.
It'd have to be... You're right. The poor dogs. They would be going crazy.
Ultrasonic might be too high for the dogs as well.
Well, yeah, maybe. But for the one or two breeds that might be able to pick it up, they would be just terrorized.
Why is the dog attacking my laptop?
Right. I was thinking
Russian hackers.
I was thinking the bathroom light tells the downstairs coffee machine that 1 for on, 0 for off. So he's come in, he's turned on the light, so turn the coffee machine on. That kind of state sharing information would be neat. But you're right, they would just do it over Wi-Fi.
Over power line would be better.
Yeah, I suppose so. This is more for covertly passing information, and
especially when it's limited to 20 meters and 20 bits per second, and at that 20 meters, I'm almost 100% sure ultrasonic sound doesn't go through anything. So it'd have to have line of sight. It won't go through a wall at all.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If I'm not incorrect.
Well, that would severely limit.
The ultrasonic rodent repellent things I have in my basement to keep the mice out of my basement. Or based on that. It's
okay.
If you put something in front of it, it'll stop working because it won't go through anything.
Okay. I have an old ultrasonic remote TV sensor. Yeah, I was thinking of that too, Netminers. I used to have something kind of like that.
Then the paper also goes on to discuss a host-based intrusion detection system that would analyze all audio coming in and out of a machine to look for suspicious signals.
Oh, could you imagine as part of an IDS having microphones in your most secure rooms listening for these types of transmissions?
Or rather, on a secure laptop, listening to everything coming in over the microphone and looking for anything that looks suspicious.
Right. So it's software on the machine, always with the mic always on, always listening. Wow. Boy, that's such a creepy level of paranoia. I'm so glad I don't even have to worry about that kind of stuff, because that's the kind of stuff
it's not recording everything you say.
No, I know. It's just just even having to worry about somebody using ultrasonic transmissions to steal my data. I'm glad I'm not in any kind of industry where that's a.
Yeah, you'd have to be doing something pretty fancy to.
Yeah, pretty fancy. All right. Well, anything else on that story?
the PDF's there, and it has all the goodness.
Including some good graphs and some good little visual demonstrations of the transmission, like in an office building and stuff.
Yep.
All right, Alan, we'll take a minute here and thank Ting.com. Go to techsnap.ting.com to save $25 off your first device. Or if you've got a device you want to bring over to Ting, well, then they'll just take $25 off your Ting service, give you a $25 credit. And if you're like me, that'll more than pay for your first month. So, my friends, why Ting? I'll tell you why Ting. No contracts, no early termination fees, and you only pay for what you use. That, I think, right there is like the three-punch combo. Boom, boom, boom. No termination fee. What? No contract. What? You only pay for what you use. It's a flat $6 plus your usage on top of that. And that's really, if you think about it, exactly how it should be. In fact, it's kind of a scam that the mobile industry has gotten us all to pay into these big contracts where, well, I might need 700 minutes, so I better get a plan that has at least 1,000 minutes just in case I get extra talkative one month. And I might one time need 2 gigs, so I better get a plan that has 5 gigs. And it just doesn't make any sense. And that's how they're just, not only is that one of the ways they're screwing you, but they're screwing you in just about every other way possible as well. And what's awesome about a Ting plan is it includes hotspot and tethering, because they're just doing it based on your usage, not based on the marketing gimmick that they've come up with for pricing structures. All you do is just go into your Android device or whatever device it is, iOS, whatever, turn on the hotspot, and then the data you use, that's what you pay for. And it's all simply laid out on the Ting site. And what's even better, you can manage it in real time with the Ting dashboard. So you can always launch the app on your phone or go to the website and see where you're at, see where your billing's at, and get a very clear picture of what's up. And every time I go, I'm just pleasantly surprised at how low that price is. It's unbelievable the amount of value you get out of a Ting account. TechSNAP.ting.com. And one of the great things about Ting is it's really easy to stay up to date on what they're working on. They've got a very good blog over at ting.com/blog. Just today, they posted what's Ting been up to, and they announced the Ting gift cards, the improvements to their SIM shipping program, and also some updates to the Ting iOS app, as well as also the Bring Your Own Device workflow, some clarifications, and some other fixes and simplifications they've made to the service recently. It's all right there, clearly laid out for you on the Ting blog. They also do app picks and all other kinds of things, and it gives you a really good insight into the kind of folks that run Ting. And for me, as a consumer who likes to make educated purchasing decisions, that's invaluable for me. And as a longtime customer now, well over, I think, I might know, maybe year and a half. I don't know if it's been 2 years. It's been a long time. I've been loving it. And I look back at it now, and it's the dashboard, it's this blog, it's the continuing updates to the Ting service. At the beginning of the year, there was a massive price reduction on data, and they just passed that savings on to the customers, and I really appreciate that. Go over to techsnap.ting.com and check out their devices, too. They got everything from the latest Android devices to some really good value phones, like even just like feature phones. You know, you need a flip phone, something that just makes phone calls. You can go in here and get something for around $100 that's contract free. You own it outright, and you're only paying for usage. They've also got data-only devices like the Novatel MiFi 5580. $120 with the TechSNAP discount, and then it's a $6 hotspot after that, and you just pay for your usage. It makes a lot of sense to me. TechSNAP.ting.com. And a big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program, for finally bringing us some mobile that makes sense. TechSNAP.ting.com.
Yeah. I understand why they don't market it as like mobile for geeks, but that's what it really is.
It is. It's for people like that have seen through the game. Like,
but yeah, we know it's not only for geeks, right? That's why they,
right.
People like Ting, and you're people.
Yeah, people. It's for people.
Ting is even the kind of thing that if they offered it in Canada, I would have my mother on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big recommendation right there. All right, Alan, I don't know if you've caught so much of this. I feel really bad for the folks at Feedly and Evernote this week. They've had a rough couple of days. I think Feedly's still experiencing some problems too, aren't they?
As far as I know.
Yeah. I think they're maybe like back up as we record, but it's only been a couple of hours.
Yeah, so Feedly and Evernote both have gone down under sustained denial of service attacks. And at least in the case of Feedly, apparently ransom demands.
Yeah, that's the dirty part.
Yeah, after restoring its service on Wednesday after the attack, the Feedly team reported on their blog that on Thursday morning that they've been hit with a second denial of service attack. And as of earlier today, when we were writing the show notes, they were still down.
Wow.
So on Thursday, June 12th, the Feedly posted on their blog at 2:04 a.m. Pacific, criminals are attacking Feedly with a distributed denial of service attack. The attackers are trying to extort us for money to make it stop. We refuse to give in and are working with our network providers to mitigate the attacks as best we can. And then in the case of Evernote, the company noted yesterday in the evening that it was unavailable and that it was working to neutralize the denial of service attack. A few hours later, a message on Evernote's Twitter account said the service had been restored, but that they weren't out of the woods yet. They said that there may be hiccups for another 1 or 2 hours.
And
sorry, 1 or 2 hiccups over the next 24 hours.
And they don't believe any user data was compromised, but sometimes you wonder if these...
I love how they say that. It's like if it's a denial of service attack, that doesn't mean that any user data would be compromised.
Right.
Although sometimes denial of service attacks are used
Exactly.
to try to cover up attacks that are trying to steal user data.
I think that's the line of thought.
Yeah, it's always a little strange when they put that and it seems out of place. Or that they have to say that because otherwise someone would assume that that meant that they were hacked. It's like no, it just means that somebody was, talking over top of them.
Yeah, people just jump to conclusions, and I think what.
But yeah, the ransom demand that's not a new thing that's happened before, and
right.
Especially back years ago. In like the IRC industry, when there was, when people made a lot of money hosting stuff on IRC and hosting servers and bots and stuff for people and providing denial of service protection and stuff for people. There was one of the competitors to my company, actually, the founder went to jail when it was proven that he was taking money from somebody who was paying him to take out his competitors.
Oh, geez. So you're right. This isn't the first.
Like servers were seized by the FBI and all that kind of fun stuff.
This isn't the first time we've seen ransoms, but for some reason, this aspect of the DDoS, and maybe it's because of the notoriety that Evernote has and Feedly has, because those are sort of like everyday usage.
I think part of it is that 10 years ago when people started getting arrested for it, demanding ransom kind of went out of style. But now that there are more, there's more people outside of the bigger countries that can do it now, right? It's not impossible to do it from Eastern Europe anymore.
Right, especially if you control machines all over the world.
Right. And so they're not subject to the FBI as much.
Right.
And also now there's more ways to get paid where it can't be traced.
So
if you were ransoming somebody and got paid by PayPal, they were going to track you down.
Do you think I'm a little worried, and maybe it's appropriate even, but I feel like we're going to see sort of the pendulum swing as I don't know. I've never really heard like these covered on the local news as much. Like our local news is covering these outages and they're mentioning the ransom and it's on the radio.
That would be because they're hitting services that
regular consumers use.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it seems to be ratcheting up the level of discussion about the whole ransom aspect more than ever. The conversation they're having on the radio is, well, at what point do we draw the line and go to war with the hackers? And they said, and the guy's like, well, as soon as they go after the big banks, well, we know they've done that before. But
the difference is the big banks have the budget to have a big enough connection.
I feel bad for folks like Feedly who get DDoSed, and then they're like, well, all right, well, you want to be back up, just pay us the scratch, and we'll turn it off.
Right, and well, basically, they're kind of stuck in the dual situation. It's like they could pay the ransom, but then, just the next guy will do it, or the same people will do it again for a bigger ransom. Or they have to pay basically the same ransom to one of the mitigation companies.
And it seems like to me, there would be a lot of pressure as a Feedly or especially as an Evernote, where your whole image for Evernote is it's the ever memory, it's always online, you can write to it. And when those services go offline, like a lot of people wake up in the morning.
Having all your notes and schedule.
It's all gone.
Calendar in the cloud if I can't access it when I need it.
So you could see how there might be pressure for them to just pay that and just get it over with because it's more important.
But no, they definitely shouldn't pay the ransom.
I agree.
They would just have to pay
more, probably
the same amount to a mitigation provider.
And they will only encourage the issue and increase the problem. And
a couple of the mitigation companies I know about. They're like, well, if you come to us on a normal day and sign up, it's like $1,000 a month, and we will provide a certain level of protection. If you call us up while you're under attack, it'll be $10,000. Because they know they have you over a barrel. And it's like
emergency
not shy about it.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, I feel bad for the fine folks over at those services, those sysadmins that are probably having a bad day. But it's interesting, too, the language Feedly is using. You know, these are criminals. They are attacking us. We have neutralized the attack. Their front is, you know, our defense front is crumbled. Like, the terminology they're using is...
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little over the top.
It's really just...
It's painting a picture, in a way.
Mitigated is the right word rather than neutralized. Neutralized would imply that you killed the bots that were attacking you, whereas mitigated means you just stopped the attack from hurting you.
The criminals have launched a second wave of DDoS attacks this morning. The ops team has reviewed the attacks and is working on building a second line of defense to neutralize this new attack. To make breaching those defenses harder, we cannot communicate as frequently as we would like to, as the status of our infrastructure changes. The second wave, although stronger, should be neutralized faster than the first one. It's pretty interesting language.
Yep. And there's some additional coverage from TechCrunch and BBC.
Yes.
And I also threw up a link from a talk I gave at EuroBSDCon about almost the same subject.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Look at you.
We probably looked at it a little bit back when I did it in like September of last year.
That does ring a bell.
Yeah. This is mitigating denial of service attacks at layer 7. Detect, localize, and mitigate using DNS. And it kind of talks about a couple of different strategies that I learned over the course of running that IRC business back in the day, and how that's changed with the newer things I've learned since then.
So we got a link to that in the show notes.
And it talks about the different type of denial of service attacks, volumetric or link saturation, which is most likely the type that Feedly is being subjected to, which is basically, you know, a bunch of bots work together to send more data to your connection than what your connection can download per second. And that way, once they do that, you know, if you have, say, 100 megabit internet at home or whatever, and they send more than 100 megabits, that means that the requests from regular people trying to get to the website that would have to come across that same link, it's always full. And if they fill up the buffer so much that it takes too long for theirs to actually get its turn to go through, or if they just get lost, right once the buffer is full, it just throws packets away until the buffer goes down. It means that people can't, the servers at Feedly never get the requests because they time out. And so people can't load the Feedly website or whatever. So that's the most basic type of attack. And that one, you know, mitigating it's a matter of, you know, blocking the source IPs that are bad or whatever. Then you have protocol type attacks. You know, that's your SYN flood. You know, basically where you start making the connection but never finish, and do that until there's no sockets left on the server or whatever. Or you send fragmented packets and all out of order, and the server spending all of its time putting the stuff back together to read it and can't actually do it. Or a packet storm, which is just excessive packets per second. So you send a very large number of very small messages, and that way it uses up all the CPU time on the server processing the individual packets and never gets a chance to deal with the application that
user requests and whatnot.
Yeah. Or resource starvation, right? You find a bug in Feedly or something that allows you to do something that uses up a lot of CPU time, and then you just do that 1,000 times a second, and then there's never any CPU time left. Or you use up all the disk, or you use up all the memory or whatever. You keep sending Feedly posts that are too big, and it takes up all their memory or all their disk or whatever.
There was an interesting, it resulted in essentially denial of service to TweetDeck. It was a cross-site scripting vulnerability, but then once it started spreading on Twitter, it sort of did a DDoS to the TweetDeck service, which I have in the roundup that we'll cover. It was kind of a funny story.
And then the coolest one that we talked about that I talked about in my talk at EuroBSDCon was denial of service level 2.
Level 2.
This is when you intentionally trigger the defense mechanism. So some places will have a defense mechanism so that if you send certain type of traffic, it will block this IP address or the subnet or something. Well, then you spoof it and make them block all the legitimate traffic. Basically trick them into thinking that legitimate traffic is an attack, so they block it, and now people can't get in because the protection system is blocking legitimate people. So it's like a meta attack. Rather than denial of servicing them, you abuse their denial of service protection system.
Right. And turn it against themselves, basically.
Service.
Yeah. It's mean.
And then for my talk, I also pulled up some statistics. These are from like Q1 of 2013 because that's when I wrote the slides. But the average attack lasts 34 and a half hours, which kind of fits with what Feedly's suffering with. Although, if there's a ransom, they might try to keep it up longer. The thing
Right.
is, if they keep it up too long, then a lot of the bots might get discovered and shut down. China is the number one origin for denial of service traffic, making up 40 to 50% of all botnet activity. They have more computers than everybody else. 75% attacks were targeted against infrastructure, which is, layer 3 and 4, SYN floods, ICMP, and UDP attacks. So most common is like the SYN flood and the volumetric type attack. But 25% of all denial of service attacks were against the application layer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's targeting something specific on HTTP or whatever the application is to try to.
Probably one of the buggiest areas, right? And an area that's got.
Well, it's the most susceptible because it's the part that actually ends up running in the user land, not in the kernel.
And can take memory up and, can get all confused
Exactly.
and crashed and, yeah.
25% of all denial of service attacks are under 1 gigabit.
Huh.
And, so that's enough to take out most people's web server, but wouldn't take out, bigger web servers or higher end type stuff. And 50% of all denial of service attacks in Q1 of 2013 were under 6 gigabits. So then I start talking about defensive techniques. The simple null route, which basically says all traffic to this IP should just stop being processed, and then you send that up through your ISP.
Mm-hmm.
And so if, your pipe can handle like 100 megabits per second, and they're sending a lot, you put a null route out that stops any traffic coming to the address of the thing that's under attack. And then in that case, all your other IP addresses, if you're a hosting company and you have 100 websites or whatever, if you block the one that's under attack, that means the rest of them at least go back to working. The person who was under attack is still blocked, but it gets everybody else back online, right? Mm-hmm. Or simple failover, which actually just means, when we're under attack, we just change our IP address to something else, and then user will start going over there, but hopefully the attack still keeps stacking the old one. And then, then I came up with a system called whack-a-mole, where you just keep doing that. And so the attacker is always chasing your tail, and you at least get some degree of being up, right?
Yeah.
And then we talk about web application firewalls, Anycast, proactive name server service, which is actually a special service designed to deal with denial of service attacks against your DNS infrastructure, right? Because that's another one is if you can't take out, if it's something really large that has so many servers you couldn't possibly take them all out.
Yeah.
But they only have 2 DNS servers.
Right, yeah. Well,
Although,
actually,
if using Anycast, it gets harder than that.
Not the same thing, but even look at somebody the size of Google who had at one time a DNS problem, and docs got knocked out for all of California. It was crazy. So it happens even to people with ginormous infrastructures.
Yeah, and then we talk also about services like for commercial solutions, you have filtering hardware like Peak Flow from Arbor Networks, or the Checkpoint firewalls, or Cisco's Guard XT, or Fortinet has the FortiDOS, and so on. Or protected hosting. These are the ones that both of these companies actually spawned out of the IRC business that I started with. But places like Black Lotus and Staminus have either you can rent your server there, so it's on a protected network, or they have GRE tunnels, where basically you use their IP addresses, or you give them access to broadcast for your IP addresses. So all the traffic, rather than going to your server, actually goes to the data centers of these mitigation providers.
Oh, yeah.
And then once they scrub out all the traffic you don't want, they send only the traffic you do want back to your actual server over a VPN, basically. And that way your servers are never actually exposed to the attackers on the internet.
Right.
And then there's also 2 different versions of that. There's one where all the incoming traffic goes that way and the outgoing actually goes from your server. Or there's the one where both go out from them, which slows things down a little bit, but means that the location of your server is kept more secret.
Right.
It makes it harder for the attackers to try to go around that protection.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have things like protection for hire. Companies like Prolexic, Cloudflare, and DOS Arrest.
Yes. And they have varying results, I would say.
Yes. And then I describe my do-it-yourself solution.
Oh, nice. Link in the show notes. That might be worth it right there.
Awesome world maps with lines drawn on them.
Nice. Hey, I like a map with lines, Alan. You know me.
It's like lines everywhere. There's like red lines and yellow lines and orange lines.
Do you have any blue?
Lines
Oh, you got blue? Oh, shoot.
Black and purple. And
Oh, purple lines? Oh, no.
The Australians have all the purple lines.
Okay. Yeah, that fits.
Ran out of colors. But there's a great quote here from Stamina. It says, transit providers are simply not going to transport more than 40 gigabits per second of dirty traffic across the world.
Right.
The only solution is to launch multiple geographically distributed scrubbing centers, scrub the data, and only transport the good data back across the world, back to where your web servers are.
Yeah.
So, if Feedly's servers are in California, the scrubbing center would have one in Europe, and all the attacks coming from Europe would go to that site, get scrubbed, and only the real requests from real users would actually get transported all the way to California.
Yeah, Rock Theory in the chat room says it's really pissing him off about Feedly being down. He reads articles every day, and I think a lot of people have, it's like their morning paper. It replaced Google Reader. When Google Reader died, that's what people switched to, and it's a lot of people's routines, and these attackers know that, and they're taking advantage of it. That's why they did a ransom, is because that's Feedly's business. And it's interesting how the hacker or attacker or whatever you want to call them, the bad actor, the malactor, they have a little insight into the business, right? They have to have a little insight to know these guys particularly hate morning downtime, and so they're attacking them in the morning. It's just I find the whole thing fascinating. Alan, why don't we take a quick break here? I'll tell you about something else that's pretty fascinating. That's DigitalOcean. Go over to DigitalOcean.com and use our promo code for the month of June, SNAPJune. I'm going to tell you why. You guys, DigitalOcean is awesome. It's a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server, and users can get started in about 55 seconds or so, and pricing plans start at only $5 a month for 512 megabytes of RAM, 20 gigabyte SSD, a blazing fast CPU, and 1 terabyte of transfer for $5 per month. But when you use our promo code SNAPJune, you'll get a $10 credit, which means you can try out the $5 rig for 2 months for absolutely free. They also offer hourly pricing. So if you really only need to do some testing from time to time, you could use our promo code to use that. You could stretch out hourly pricing for quite a long time with a $10 credit. And I think also it's worth checking out their whole droplet deployment system, because you could spend a little time creating a system once. Maybe it's a CentOS rig, a Fedora rig, an Ubuntu, whatever. I've got an Arch box up there. You set some time setting it up once, and then you can snapshot that and deploy it. And DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, and Amsterdam, so you can deploy that image immediately and get right down to work. You combine that with their hourly pricing. That's pretty compelling. But the other thing they offer that I don't talk a lot about is private networking. So say you spin up a droplet in their New York 2 data center. You can have DigitalOcean droplets communicate with each other privately inside the DigitalOcean data center, never out throughout the net. And the thing that's great about that, too, is DigitalOcean won't charge that against your transfer. It doesn't count towards your 1 terabyte or any of that. So if you want to do replication between 2 machines on the back end over private networking, that doesn't go towards your bandwidth total. And it's never out over the internet, which is great for maybe a web server with database backends or something like that. And again, you combine that with their awesome management system and their data centers all over the world and their incredible pricing. And you can see why once you also think, geez, 99.99% uptime, SSD, powered storage, private networking, global image transfer, DNS management. I mean, really, it's like one of the coolest services ever. And you can get a $10 credit when you use the promo code SNAPJune. SNAPJune over at DigitalOcean.com to try them out. See what I've been talking about? Try out that excellent dashboard they have with an HTML5 console, so you can get access right from the BIOS all the way through the boot process up to the console, and then root. You get SSH root once you need to get from there. I mean, why not, right? Go give them a shot. See what you can do. DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code SNAPJune. And a huge thank you to DigitalOcean for rocking the support for the TechSNAP program, for having an awesome service, and for really showing me there is actually a way to make virtual machine management that straightforward and that powerful through a web interface. I wouldn't believe it was possible until I tried out DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean.com. Thanks, DigitalOcean. Okay, Mr. Jude. Now, I believe our next stop takes us to our friends in Redmond, doesn't it?
Kind of, tangentially.
Tangentially. All right, where do we start?
So some researchers have posted some German researchers have posted a paper from the troopers.de conference
Okay.
where they're claiming that Microsoft has been patching flaws in Windows 8 and not applying the same fixes to Windows 7.
Oh. So this is actually Redmond via Germany. So you mean as in like security updates?
I wouldn't say so much quite security
Okay.
updates, but
Okay.
more security features.
Ah, yeah.
Certain types of improvements that aren't being made.
Okay.
So the researchers found the gaps after they scanned about 900 different Windows libraries and uncovered a variety of secure functions that were updated in Windows 8 but not in Windows 7. They said the shortcoming could lead to the discovery of zero-day vulnerabilities because obviously if Microsoft changed it in Windows 8, they must have had a reason to.
Well,
Right?
If their feature and architecture is a really loose term, but if their feature
Right. It's not a new feature. It's improving an existing
thing,
security function
yeah,
so that there's not a hole in it.
okay, yeah, so it's something that already existed in 7 that they improved upon in 8 and didn't add those improvements to 7.
But we've seen stuff like this before, right? With Windows XP, they never added that what was
UAC,
it?
for example, or
Well, yeah, UAC, but more simple stuff like the
memory randomization.
server name indication so you could do SSL, multiple certificates on the same IP address,
Right,
and there was no reason that couldn't have been added
right.
in Windows XP, and it could be most of the internet could be using that today if it had been added to XP when it was developed back in the mid 2000s.
So they built this tool called diffray, and this tool called diffray goes in and basically diffs 7 and 8 and shakes it all out and says, all right, well, here's the stuff that's missing from 7.
Yeah. The missing safe functions were part of Microsoft's dedicated security libraries, IntSafe and StirSafe, which help developers combat various attacks by basically, doing bounds checking on integers, cleaning up a string to make sure it doesn't buffer overflow and all that kind of stuff. And basically adding the additional stuff to those functions in Windows 8 and not backporting them in Windows 7. Which may exist solely because, maybe an app, assumes the broken behavior in order to work. But it doesn't seem like most apps are going to, detect which version you're using and use the broken behavior on 7 and not on 8. So it seems like that's a bogus argument.
Well, and I'm disappointed, but I guess I'm not that surprised. If Microsoft sees these things as features, then
they're not really features.
I know. But I'm just saying if they see them that way.
Microsoft hasn't kind of made a statement about this, so we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So the researchers, Mote Joseph and Marian Marschleck,
Yeah, I think so.
developed the capability diffing tool, which they call diffray.
Diffray.
And some of the functions kind of jump out at you, like in the bcrypt.dll, convert RSA private blob to full RSA. And they just made a couple of tweaks to that in Windows 8. It's like, seems like that tweak should have been backported.
Right.
Or netlogon.dll, add resource group to SAM info. It's like, oh, look, there was a problem here and we fixed it, but Windows 7 doesn't need that.
Right. And this is all in their report that they released?
Yeah. It's all in the PDF, which is linked.
What happens in Windows 7 stays in Windows 7. That's what I call it.
The biggest one, though, is in the twext.dll. There's a method called escape field. And apparently looks like the Windows 7 version might have a buffer overflow that was fixed in 8, but is still there in 7. And it'd be interesting to see if someone can actually exploit that, and then that would mean they have found a zero-day that Microsoft had patched in 8 and left in 7.
Did you happen to scroll down to page 7 of the PDF?
Is that the Bruce Schneier as Chuck Norris skip?
Yes. I've never seen this before.
Yeah, and there's also a video from the conference when they presented the paper.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, cool. Huh. Well, that's an interesting little write-up, and I don't quite know what to make of it either, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to find out a little bit more about it. This is, very deep research, and hopefully somebody will dig into it more. This should prompt a discussion, and we'll find out more in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and I wonder if Microsoft. I would really like to hear a response from Microsoft to see what they say about it, because they might have a perfectly reasonable response. I mean, we might not agree with it.
A perfectly reasonable response could be, we don't care.
Yeah, if you have a problem, their response might be, hey, if you got a problem with it, why don't you upgrade? right? I mean, that's a possibility. So, yeah, I don't know. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
Nope, that's about it.
Well, then why don't I tell you about the great folks over at IXsystems. IXsystems.com/TechSNAP. That'll get you started. Go check out some of those IX rigs powered by the awesome Intel Xeon processors. And when you go to IXsystems.com/TechSNAP, not only does that tell them that, hey, I appreciate you supporting the TechSNAP program, but it's also where you can find the ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source. 11 key traits you must absolutely demand from your provider. This is something that they didn't create this themselves, right? But this is something they're like, this is such a good fit. Who created this, Alan? You told me once before, didn't you?
Yeah, I think it says on the page there someone. But it wasn't created by IX themselves. They actually
Right.
had an external person create it for them.
Yeah, and I think it's a great idea because if if you've been stuck with providers, hardware providers that obviously don't get the solutions you're trying to build, obviously are not comfortable supporting the platforms and maybe the open source technology that you want to use, well, this will help convince your upper management to invest in a company that not only offers white glove support, has some of the best people in the industry to be working on this technology, some of the best relationships in this industry, but also is set up to not only answer your questions and build the right solution, but then support that, even if it's running Linux or FreeBSD, or they probably even would support Windows. I mean, I wouldn't know.
Yep. Actually, if you want to find out more about how great their support is, in a couple of weeks, we'll have an interview we recorded yesterday with Josh Petzel, who's their director of IT.
Oh, cool.
And he tells some war stories of where he's gone out to help customers out, including an epic war story that went on for a couple of days over the Memorial Day weekend just a couple of weeks ago.
I bet he has seen some things.
But yeah, so basically it involved on the Memorial Day weekend, him getting his truck, going over to the IX office, loading up 100 terabytes of storage into his truck, and then driving it 6 hours to the customer and getting their stuff back online in time for the resume of business after the holiday.
That's what I'm talking about when I talk about white glove service. And if you have a service dependent on IX hardware, isn't that nice to know you can depend on that level of service? And what's also really indicative of, I think, of where they're at is they really put stuff through a rigorous testing process because they want you to know that when you receive it, they're not going to waste your time. They're not going to have you get something set up and then have it die as soon as it goes into production. And that is one of the most frustrating things when you're working on a project, when you're on a timeline. I mean,
as we've seen from lots of studies from Backblaze and Google and so on,
right?
If a hard drive is going to die, it's going to die in the first 24 hours of being powered on.
Right. And then plus you also just sort of have the peace of mind that some of the folks working at IXsystems are the very people that have invented or are continuing to work on the technology that you rely on. And I don't think you can probably understate that enough. That's sort of a huge deal. Talk about insight and perspectives to build awesome solutions. IXsystems.com/TechSNAP. Keep them in mind when you're going out there. If you're doing anything from, like I have here at the JB1 Studios, a FreeNAS Mini. And it has been...
Josh was talking about some of the improvements they made to the
FreeNAS in your interview?
Including the new way they have the installer to make it easier to install on the older FreeNAS Mini like you had. Do you remember when Rikai wanted to update it? It was a pain. Well, they fixed that.
It wasn't actually that bad, but if they made it even easier.
They made it really easy now. For the ones where, because the install was meant to be done off CD, and when the USB image they used to offer wasn't an installer, it was run off this USB.
Right, yep.
But the older ones had a SATA DOM, and they wanted to load it on that. Yeah, well, that's all awesome now. And we talked a bit about that and the plans for FreeNAS 9.3 and FreeNAS 10.
These are the guys working on FreeNAS. And plus they also have TrueNAS available for enterprise. So they have everything down to small business and consumer up to the ultimate high end. It's some really cool stuff.
You can also get a workstation or whatever else you need.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea either. IXsystems.com/TechSNAP. Go check them out, you guys. I mean, Alan and I are huge fans.
From all time.
Yeah, the behind the scenes story is both Alan and I were customers of IXsystems for years. And then we're like, you guys seriously would be such a great sponsor because we have worked in this industry for a long time. We've ordered from a lot of different hardware providers out there. And both Alan and I, independently of each other, came to IXsystems and have been very happy.
Yeah, I did it in person.
Right. Yeah.
I saw the owner or one of the owners there while I was at VBSDCon last year. And, we were kind of just chatting in the hallway between two of the talks. And we got to talking and things. And
yeah.
And they did it, and they tried it for a month. So we set up a deal, and they tried it for a month, and then they realized that they kept getting leads even after the month was over because the way they embed them in the episodes and stuff. And
and it's been really great because it's truly like, finally, guys, we found this company that we work with. We want you to work with them too. So go try them out. IXsystems.com/TechSNAP. I want to plug one thing before we go because it's wrapping up, and we won't have, it'll be done by the time the next TechSNAP's on the air, because this is, let's see, what is it? 5 days left. Teespring.com/unfilter100, limited time unfilter 100 t-shirt, and you can grab it now, some limited time JB swag. We have 101 sold towards our goal of 133 with 5 days and 10 hours left as we record this. We got a t-shirt, a long sleeve, and a hoodie of different various colors. And Alan, we mentioned the TechSNAP 100 shirt was available, and then the website went down. I don't know quite what's up with that, so we'll reach out to Teespring and try to find out. So that way, eventually, the TechSNAP 100 shirt will be back up again. But teespring.com/unfilter100, limited time unfilter, hoodie, t-shirt, and long sleeve available for 5 more days. And I think this will probably be the last Jupiter swag that we sell via Teespring for a little while. I don't know. I think we'll take a break for a bit. So go grab this one if you want some summer swag over at teespring.com/unfilter100. A polo shirt, And today I'm wearing a polo shirt that was mailed to me by Blaster in the chat room. How cool is that? So it's audience-provided swag for me, and I like it. It's got a little embroidered Jupiter Broadcasting logo right where my comm badge would be if I was in Star Trek. So it's kind of like the Jupiter Broadcasting logo is beam me up.
Sure.
No?
No, I said sure.
No, okay. You're humoring me. I get it. That's fine. All right, Alan, with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And our first email this week comes in from viewer Todd, or listener. I don't mean to be presumptive. He says, "Hello, Alan and Chris. I'm noticing a new feature on RAID controllers called Cachecade, which supposedly adds an SSD cache on top of a built-in controller cache. You actually install an SSD drive on the controller. Version 1.0 only has read caching, but version 2.0 has both read and write caching. With ZFS, with ZFS, my understanding is that you need to have at least 64 gigabytes of RAM in order to properly utilize an SSD L2 ARC read cache. How would this work at a RAID controller level?" Big fan of the show, Todd.
There's a couple different things. Basically, this feature is designed for Windows machines that couldn't have ZFS.
Yeah.
And it has a number of disadvantages over actual ZFS because at the hardware RAID level, it doesn't know anything about your file system.
Right.
And all it can do is cache actual blocks. One of the nice things about ZFS is you can turn the L2 ARC on and off for different data sets. Saying, hey, this data set, I don't care if it's slow. Don't bother caching it.
That is nice.
I only care about this one data set, so don't cache anything except for this one and things like that. And also just the write cache is not related to an L2 ARC. That's a ZIL. It's different. The problem with some of the hardware RAID ones is I don't know how the write cache for the hardware, the Cascade and so on, actually handles synchronous versus asynchronous and stuff. And how it wears the SSD and what happens to that write cache if the SSD starts to wear out, and if they don't have any checksumming, can you really trust that the write that got cached actually hit the disk properly?
Yeah, it seems like too that the SSD would only be used after maybe the RAID controller's onboard memory was exhausted, maybe, or
depends. Well, yeah, but and again, if they're usually that's like 512 megabytes or something, and it's or only does.
The immediate.
If it's doing the read and the write caching, then how does it decide to balance those and so on? So yeah, the biggest difference is if there's a bug in the hardware caching system, that's pretty hard to fix, right? It means a firmware update or whatever. Well, ZFS is,
and the thing is with ZFS is it's the whole it is file system aware, so it knows if there's corruption. It's copy
Yeah,
on.
it just knows everything and you can set everything.
So
The problem with this is that you have no exposure of what's actually happening. You can't attach dtrace to see what's getting cached and what's not and so on.
But if you're
And
not,
if you're using this under ZFS, it will probably confuse the shit out of things.
well, if you're okay, but let's say you're not on
But you
a
shouldn't be.
ZFS. If you're not
Right,
on a
if
ZFS,
you're on a
rig,
Windows machine, it could help. As you know,
Yeah.
if it's a Windows server and
Use an
you're doing
NTFS.
this, it might help.
Yeah, yeah.
But then again, you could also just, have your OS on one drives and then iSCSI mount and use that iSCSI mount to off a ZFS machine to host your Exchange server.
You mean like a gentleman?
Yeah,
like a gentleman.
So I've seen this stuff. I was a little interested, but mostly I was like, I wouldn't want that because I would just use ZFS.
Yeah.
As far as needing at least 64 gigs of RAM to use an L2 ARC, it depends. An L2 ARC takes extra RAM because it has to keep track of what's in the L2 ARC, and it can't do that on the L2 ARC. It does that in the main ARC. And so the bigger your L2 ARC is, the more RAM you need. But you're only adding an L2 ARC if you've already added as much RAM as you can. So, in most cases, the answer is always more RAM.
Mm-hmm. More RAM.
Yeah, and in most cases, an L2 ARC isn't that big of a deal. Like, you don't really need one. Most times, the problem people have is writing, not reading. And so there's a ZIL, and ZILs only need to be small. For an L2 ARC, yeah, you don't need an L2 ARC if you haven't already added at least 64 gigs of RAM to the machine.
There you go.
Although 32 would be enough. A lot of it actually depends on the size of the L2 ARC you're trying to use. If you're trying to use a very, very large L2 ARC, then it will cause you problems if you don't have enough RAM. So a small one is fine, but a big one causes problems. And actually, Josh, in our interview with him on BSD Now, talked about it a bit. The L2 ARC is only really useful if it's at least 5, more like 10 times faster than your actual spinning disks or your main disks. So, an L2 ARC on an all SSD pool is just silly.
Okay.
But, depending what your workload is and stuff, it can make a difference. If you have a lot of random reads of the same things over and over again, an L2 ARC can help. But if your working data set isn't going to fit on the SSD either, then it's probably just a waste of time. Because all you're going to do is constantly overwrite the data on the SSD with different data and almost never get a cache hit. So if you're looking at your stuff, there's a tool on FreeBSD under the sysutils category called ZFS-stats. And if you run that, or it's subtools ZFS, I think it's ZFS-mon or Zmon or something like that, it will show you your cache hit ratios. And if they're not high enough, then adding more isn't necessarily going to help.
There you go. That's a great tool to use. Yeah. All right. Our next email comes in from Lewis. I'm going to say Felipe. How do you say Felipe? Felipe. I'm going to go Felipe. He says, hi, guys. Big fan of the shows. He watches religiously, he says. I've been increasingly wondering how to configure and use my Soho server's hardware to make it more reliable. My server currently has a Supermicro Mobo with a dual-socket Opteron for 64 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM, a server RAID M5016, and a BBU and 1 gigabyte of cache. Oh, how about that? Speaking of cache, two 300 gigabyte, 15,000 RPM SAS drives, 9 SATA 3, all 2 terabyte drives, all powered by a Corsair PSU backed by a smart UPS APC. So he says he was watching Linux Action Show. He's implemented Proxmox. He's implemented pfSense. He has 2 SAS drives configured as RAID 1. And then he has Proxmox installed on the resulting volume with the VMs and containers. He says data are stored on hardware RAID 5, also using those 3 SATA drives I mentioned earlier. This volume is passed to the CentOS VM as raw unformatted, and then format is extended for inside the VM. Finally, the 6 remaining SATA drives are connected to an M1015 HBA as assembled in MD-ADM RAID 5 and formatted with ZFS and passed to the CentOS VM. Wow. So he's using a combination of ZFS and Linux RAID.
I wouldn't have put the ZFS on top of the RAID 5.
Right.
I would have just passed the raw disk into the VM and then had ZFS on top of that.
And
ZFS
he admits,
on top of RAID 5 is horrible.
He admits it's messy. So he says, with this hardware setup, how would you reconfigure this monster, keeping data integrity absolutely in mind? He says he does care about performance, but he cares a lot more about data integrity. So he wants your criticism, but he does want that we refrain from suggesting he start from scratch. because he doesn't really want to do
yeah,
that.
my obvious reaction is ZFS all of the things.
Yeah,
Rid of all the hardware.
the thing that
but,
really jumps out at me is the way he's passing the disk through to the VM.
Yeah. And also, if with the 9 SATA disks, I probably would have just created one big pool instead.
Yeah, I think a couple of them are 15,000 RPM, so they're like special performance.
The two 300 gig 15,000 RPM, you can RAID one of those and run your Proxmox on it. That makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
But then so he's got 3 that are hosting data.
Yep. And then 9 drives.
3 drives in a RAID 5 that are hosting data on something.
Yep.
Oh, and they're on one controller. And then the other 6 drives on another controller that then go into the CentOS.
He's got quite a bit. He's got quite a
So the first 3 drives, which VM has them? Doesn't really say. But basically, if you can get away with it, okay, no, he can't. Okay, so yeah, he's got the 5016 with the cache or with the battery backup in the cache, which has the 2 300 gig drives and 3 of the SATA drives.
Yes.
So he can't pass the whole controller through to the VM because then he wouldn't have the 2 disks that actually have the Proxmox on it in the host anymore.
Right.
Okay.
And then he's got the remaining 6 drives as a RAID 5, formatted with ZFS, and passed to the VM for use.
So definitely what you would want to do is pass the entire M1015 HBA through into CentOS, like hardware pass through the controller, instead of making a MD-ADM RAID and then passing that device into the VM, so that the ZFS in the CentOS doesn't have to go through a Linux RAID 5, because ZFS, basically your ZFS setup is going to only consist of one device, and so it won't have any redundancy. So he's actually using ZFS and not getting any benefit because he's got one disk, right? Because all he has is the one RAID 5 volume.
Right.
Whereas if he actually passes through all 5, or was he get 6?
Yes, 6.
Yeah, 6 original disks into there, then it would get better. Also, when I did that, I would probably do it as RAID Z2. You'll get a little bit less space, but then you have the double redundancy.
And that's what he wants. Yep.
Yeah. Now, if you could pass all 9 SATA 3 disks through, even if you have to do the whole M1015 controller and then do the manual device, like one drive at a time pass through of the other 3, you know what I mean? Like if the 3 of the hard drives have to go through the software emulation layer, that's fine.
Yeah.
But at least get some of them not doing that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, if you create a new RAID new ZFS RAID Z2 or Z3 if you're really paranoid, but you probably don't need to be that paranoid, into the CentOS, then you could get all your storage in one place and get more stuff out of it, right? Basically, if he has 3 in one RAID 5 and 6 in another RAID 5, meant that he was getting 7 drives of storage. If he did all of that in all 9 disks in one pool, with Z2, he could have 2 disks of redundancy and still have the 7 disks of storage. So he wouldn't lose any storage space, and he would get all that much more of the...
But then he'd have those 15,000 RPM drives in the overall pool, right?
No, the 2
keep those
RPM
separate.
Drives, they can... Yeah, because they're running in Proxmox, right? So they can stay in Harbor RAID and run Proxmox. Okay. And then all 9 SATA drives could go into the CentOS.
I like... Oh, I see.
It doesn't say where those 3 with the Harbor RAID 5 are going right now. He just says that he's storing all of his files on them.
Yeah. It might be going to a VM.
His clients, backups, and VM backups, and so on.
Yeah. There you go.
The problem with that setup basically is that he needs somewhere to put the files temporarily while he does that.
That's the hard part.
The other ways of doing that would be to create 2 separate VDEVs, so you could do half the disks at a time kind of thing.
Okay.
Or to do it in mirror pairs. Although with 9 disks, that wouldn't work out perfect. It'd be short a little bit, right? Although if his system currently has 11 disks, it might have a slot for 1 more disk. But,
that's true. It might have a big rig.
If you want best performance, then mirrors are the best way to go, right? So you just create, groups of 2 disks at a time, and that gives you the easiest flexibility as far as writing the data to it, although you get unbalanced LUNs, so that's downside as well. But ZFS all the things, and avoid putting ZFS on top of RAID 5 because you lose all the features.
All right, let's see if we can answer Casey's question. Casey writes in, says, with the recent announcements of Google for end-to-end encryption for email, there's a question that arises in my mind. As we know via Snowden et al., that the RSA has been compromised. And what is the value of using GPG or OpenPGP encryption considering that the suggested default is RSA? Are there other solutions that you can suggest your student, your viewer, and supporter, Casey?
Well, GPG can use DSA and elliptic curve DSA and a bunch of other algorithms, but they didn't compromise the RSA algorithm. They were just doing hinky things with RSA, the company. As far as we know, no one's compromised the RSA algorithm. If they did, they wouldn't have to, purposely put bugs in OpenSSL and stuff.
Hey, I like to have their options, Alan.
Right. So yeah, as far as we know, the RSA algorithm has not been compromised. Just RSA, the company, was doing things like making their the NSA's purposely backdoored.
Right. There's
the
yes
dual elliptic curve.
Yeah.
Special magic number algorithm.
Right.
Yeah. RSA made that the default for some of their commercial products. Not ever. It was never the default in any open source product.
Right. Yep. Just certain commercial products use that.
Yeah. As the default, unless you set something better. And you'd been instructed to use something better for years, and then they made it much more explicit after the NSA stuff.
All right. That's probably your best answer right there. You don't really have to worry about it.
Basically the Google end-to-end encryption option only uses elliptic curve because it takes less CPU time to calculate, and they're doing it in JavaScript. The problem is that that's only supported in GPG version 2.1, which isn't really mainstream yet. So that means that Google's system is basically incompatible with everybody's who's already encrypting their email.
But it works in JavaScript.
Yeah.
Yay.
Well, Keybase proved that you can do it the other way in JavaScript. It just takes longer.
I'm okay with taking a little bit longer.
Like especially when you're talking like hundreds of milliseconds.
Yeah, I know that when Google
even if it
builds
takes 10 seconds to encrypt my email.
Yeah.
Yippee ding.
I almost rather, because then it feels like it's actually doing something.
Exactly.
All right, Gaffin writes in. He says, Dear Alan and Chris, recently I've been looking into FTP, and I've learned that it's not encrypted. Looking for secure options now, I got bombarded with options such as SFTP, FTPS, FTP over SSH. What do I choose? I'm only planning on using a small home server with nothing too important on it, but what kind of secure connection is best for this type of situation? Is my concern valid?
Yes, the fact that FTP is completely unencrypted is a valid concern. Also, the fact that it passes IP addresses in the protocol, which makes it break behind NAT and so on, is a problem. So if it's your home server, if it's running BSD or Linux or something, it'll probably already have SSH. And that means SFTP is already built into SSH.
And it's easy
they give you SFTP and SCP, and you're good.
And there's great clients for every operating system, too.
Yeah, and yes, FileZilla is a great client. That's what I use.
Yes.
Now, FTPS is basically the FTP protocol, the existing one, just done over SSL, just like we have HTTPS is regular HTTP over SSL. The difference there is that you actually would have certificates, whereas with SFTP, it's like SSH. You just have a key that you accept or whatever, a fingerprint. So depending on what you want, you could, if you actually have SSL certificates or you want to spend the $10 to get one, then you could actually, get a certificate that verifies that, this is actually the host it says it is or whatever. But basically FTPS is not very popular because why use the old horrible FTP protocol over SSL when you could just use SSH, which is better and works better and doesn't have problems with NAT.
And offers even nice options like if you need it, compression, depending on what you're transferring, that might help too, and things like that. Frederico.
And then FTP over SSH is basically just doing regular FTP over an SSH tunnel. That gives you the security, but SFTP is almost the same. Like as far as the commands you use and stuff, it's almost a drop-in replacement, and it's better.
And it's easier.
I would recommend SFTP.
Yes. All right. Now, Frederico writes in. He says, Hello, Alan and Chris. I'm a contractor for a big ISP, and I see that all business customers with more than one location are served with MPLS. It's also pretty common for them to have their MPLS taken all the way to other European countries, but also South America, China, and the rest of the world. What I wanted to know is this. Is MPLS any good NSA-wise? As far as I know, the traffic being sent over the network is unencrypted, and while every customer's network is separated from one other, all it takes would be TCP dump to expose everything that goes through it. Does Scale Engine use MPLS at all, or do you prefer to have a VPN between your different sites and locations? Thank you in advance, Frederico.
Yeah. So MPLS is basically kind of like VLANs, but over the internet. And it's not meant to provide any security, and that's why it doesn't. It's just meant to tag packets and basically allow you
Organize
to
them.
have one big pipe where you can make many virtual pipes over it.
Yeah.
So kind of a tunnel, but not a VPN, right? Because the P in VPN means private. This is for sending data over the public internet. So basically, if you want encrypted connection, then you would just encrypt it and then send it over the MPLS. So even if you use a VPN, it would probably then just be a VPN over the MPLS or inside the MPLS. So, sending a packet over MPLS is the same as sending it over the regular internet. It's just MPLS is just the way that you sort the packets between the routers.
Yeah. It doesn't negate the need for encryption.
Yeah, and it's not trying to. It doesn't claim to do anything for security.
Right.
It's just a way of basically creating virtual circuits. Right. So, the ISP has one big line going from this point to that point, and, I need less bandwidth than I don't need enough bandwidth in order to pay to run my own cable across the Atlantic Ocean. But somebody who has a cable can lease me out, a certain number of megabits across that line or whatever.
So that means, Federico, your spider sense was indeed tingling. They still need to use encryption. If you see them using that and assume everything's fine.
If they care,
if they care.
Scale engine we don't use, we actually don't have MPLS, we don't have special setups between our networks. We don't need the dedicated bandwidth. And VPN, we don't bother because we're sending stuff that we're giving away to the public.
You're broadcasting anyways?
Yeah,
right.
We don't need to encrypt this stream for TechSNAP because we're giving it away anyway. We want everybody
to have it. We're trying to give it away. That's the whole design of the system, is to give it away publicly.
And then anything that we do need security, it's mostly just SSH.
Yeah.
Because that's the easiest way.
Yep, SSH or SFTP or whatever it might be. That's how we send files up to Scale Engine, is over SFTP.
Yeah, it's also, it's the same as sending a packet over the internet any other way. MPLS is just basically VLANs over the internet.
Yeah.
And so it's not actually providing any security. Now, as far as this thing about running TCP dump, now if you're running TCP dump on a router in the middle of the connection, sure. But normally the way it works is the MPLS switch or router will only send down to your port. So what you actually receive on the connection at the very end, when you're the customer, you only get to see your traffic. The switch doesn't waste time sending other people's traffic down your port because you're not supposed to get it.
Except for Federico works at what he says is a major ISP.
Right. So if he's in the middle and running TCP dump,
so he could. He could. And he's very astute.
The end customers don't get sent the extra traffic because it would just be a waste.
Right. Yeah.
Not for security reasons. It's just because
efficiency. Yeah. It'd take more bandwidth. There you go. Thanks. And if you would like to send a question to the TechSNAP program, we would like to get that question. Go over to Jupiter Broadcasting, click the contact link, and choose TechSNAP from the dropdown, and send us in your systems, network administration, storage related question. We want to hear it, security, anything like that. Or you can also go over to our subreddit, links.techsnap.tv, and start a discussion thread there that the whole community can jump in on. And a lot of times when folks just have something they kind of want a quick answer to, or just spitball in general, that's a great place to go. They'll fire up a thread over there and they'll get a whole bunch of replies. You remember last week when I put a call out, what was it? It was a meetup. I put a call out for a meetup, and where I was like, I don't know, maybe we might have a few people in the area. I'm going to go pull that up right now because it got an incredible response. And just this good example of how awesome the TechSNAP subreddit community can be sometimes. Let's see if I don't know if I'll be able to find it now. Son of a gun. But anyways, you can find it. Go over to links.techsnap.tv. It's over there. Oh, geez, look at this. And sometimes you'll find crazy meme pictures, too, that are taken from the live stream that I didn't know were up on the subreddit. Oh, geez.
A couple of Allen memes that
Yeah, there's a couple of Allen memes that have cropped up on the subreddit. But I think it was a Sweden meetup. The question was are there any...
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. Well, it's a 42 reply deep thread now, and they're planning a meetup, and there's a ton of responses. So, any Swedish TechSNAP fans, 42 responses. It was started 7 days ago, so that's pretty cool. I'll give it one more mention here because look, they've got a great. Look at this lineup of folks they've got. A lot of people watching over there. That's awesome.
That's good.
Yeah. So if you're a Swedish TechSNAP fan and want to give people a shout out and maybe partake in a meetup, they got a thread going in links.techsnap.tv, and that's also a good spot to leave some feedback while you're over there or submit something for the show. All right, Alan, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that just didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them, give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And a lot of these links came from our brand new subreddit, just launched it today, links.techsnap.tv. Something like that. And Alan, our first Roundup story is about replicating the NSA's gadgets using open source.
Yeah, so this guy got a hold of that Ant catalog of all the cool toys the NSA had built for spying on USB and cell phone tracking cell phones and stuff.
Yes.
And it's a podcast where he's talking about, he started thinking, well, how hard would it, now that I know the basis and the general idea of how it works, how hard would it be for me to build something like that?
That's awesome. So and what a great idea for a podcast topic. That's a fun topic. Holy smokes. I like that. And that's from an old callback from something we covered quite a while ago. Well, Alan, good news. Target's no longer going to be able to figure out when you're pregnant before you do because iOS 8 randomizes your MAC address when searching for Wi-Fi access points. I don't know if you guys remember way back, we had a Roundup story where Target was boasting that based on customer tracking, they were figuring out when their female customers were pregnant potentially before.
Yeah, but that wasn't using your cell phone. That was just using your loyalty card, I think. But
I thought it was Bluetooth, too. I thought they were
might
using,
have been.
Yeah.
I remember we covered a story where in Calgary they were using the Bluetooth to tell how much traffic there was by how fast your Bluetooth MAC address was moving down the road.
Right, and we've heard of marketers here in the U.S. that use Wi-Fi to just see what aisle you're on or whatever,
or how often you're coming back to the store.
Yeah.
Or if they own a chain or a bunch of different stores, they can tell which stores you visit, which ones you don't, and so on.
So I'm sure the marketers will be going out and rushing out to buy iBeacons now so they can track you using those. So, Alan, when Apple closes a door, they always open a window or something like that. All right, next Roundup story, Cisco patches cross-site flaw. I forgot to add a link in their security appliances.
So there was a cross-site scripting flaw in some of the security appliances that would allow an unauthenticated user to do remote code execution. That's not a very good firewall.
No. Womp womp. Well, good. Go out and patch your Cisco boxes, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Cisco Email Security Appliance 8.0 and earlier, Cisco Web Security Appliance, and Cisco Security Management Appliance. Go patch. That's on the edge. All right, well, this next one I watched happen, and I didn't quite grok what was happening because I was just seeing this weird JavaScript or whatever it was show up in my Twitter feed. Turns out it was a massive TweetDeck outage that was caused by accident when a teen was experimenting. A 19-year-old Australian Twitter user has apologized when he came up with some code to try to make a smiley heart face thingy. He tried to do like a heart in code. Yep. And it triggered like this massive problem in TweetDeck. And then people...
they used basically a cross-site scripting flaw in TweetDeck so that when you tweeted it, it would cause everyone who saw it to then tweet...
To retweet it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just started...
Like 36,000 retweets.
Yes.
And none of those 36,000 users clicked to do it.
No, and what was funny is...
major flaw. And it basically created a denial of service attack by causing every user to keep doing this.
I knew something was up because the Twitter app on my phone notifies me like when a whole bunch of people I follow RT something at the same time. And so I started getting these notifications on my phone. So-and-so has retweeted so-and-so. And like, why is everybody retweeting this? So I open up the Twitter app, and of course on the Twitter app, nothing happens. I just see the code, and I'm like, well, that's a weird thing to tweet. And I close it. And then I opened up TweetDeck earlier, and it's down. They had to shut down TweetDeck for a few hours. So funny. Just trying to make a heart, Alan. Just trying to bring love to his Twitter feed. All right, next story. Google engineer. We need more web programming languages.
Mostly he was talking about as things go forward, there's times when more and more apps are going to be transitioning to be written in web languages and so on, and they need to be able to deal with things like you won't always have an internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know if you've experienced this yet, but my last flight on an airplane, I actually was allowed to keep my phone on the whole time, just in airplane mode.
Nice.
I didn't have to turn it all the way off for takeoff and landing, which means I could use the apps now. But those apps have to be able to deal with the fact that I have no connection while I'm in the air.
Right.
And a version of Google Docs that can work while I have no connection is obviously very useful.
That would be
especially
very nice.
Recording the history and the chunks so that how with the Google history you can step back and undo a change. Well, I don't want that to show up. I don't want everything I did on the airplane to be one change. I want it chunked out like 5 minutes or something like that, right? Like it would be when you were online.
Right.
And so
some sort
languages that have support for that kind of stuff.
Some sort of local additional component that once you're connected
right,
again, it's
a
smart
lot of
about
have
it.
support for this kind of stuff. We just need new languages that are designed to languages and frameworks that are designed to take advantage of that stuff
Or
and deal with those issues.
local apps. Huh? I know it's a new idea. It'll take off eventually. I'm just kidding. All right.
The difference is that web apps can target multiple platforms.
Yeah, I know. There's a place for. Obviously, we use Google Docs heavily here. Obviously,
But
there's a
yeah,
place for it.
when I wrote the first billing system for my first company,
Yeah.
I specifically made it a desktop app because web apps were slow.
Right.
At the time, I was on dial-up, which meant 600 plus millisecond round trip every time I clicked before.
Ooh.
It would take a very long time for the next page to load, like a second.
Well, sometimes like
it
a
made it
slow
really hard to
mobile
do stuff.
connection.
Now, that my ping to the servers where I host my billing system is like 15 milliseconds.
Right.
I don't have a problem doing it online instead.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. And then it's funny though, because as we go forward, then we introduce new technologies like mobile, where sometimes it feels like you're on a modem again.
Yep.
Okay, so Microsoft, a lot of companies that have been caught in the whole NSA revelations have definitely been, I think, trying to publicly present, a bit of a stronger stance and push back a little bit. Microsoft is challenging the authority of federal prosecutors to force them to hand over customers' emails stored in a data center in Ireland. And so the United States position is, well, because Microsoft is a U.S. company, it does not matter where the data is stored. We go to them. Microsoft's position is, no, you need to go through the legal processes in the country that you want to get the data from. And so they're pushing back. And Verizon,
otherwise, every company would just base itself in the Grand Caymans or something.
Verizon has also filed a friend of the court letter saying they agree with Microsoft, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation is working to come up with a brief that supports Microsoft. So you got Verizon.
I'm kind of expecting the EU government to step in and say, no, Americans can't just subpoena records of European people with no.
As a matter of fact,
European side.
some European officials have expressed some concern, though they haven't taken any action yet. Some people speculate it would violate international law and treaties and reduce privacy protections of everyone on the planet.
Basically, if you open this up to that, then that could mean that some other country could demand data from a U.S. company,
right,
or something, right?
Yeah.
It's just
this has been brewing.
mess.
This has been brewing though for a while, because the federal magistrate judge in New York actually gave the U.S. government this search warrant last December as part of a criminal drug inquiry. So they're just doing like a drug bust, and this came up.
Well, that's how they like to phrase it the first time they do it.
Right. Yeah. Start it with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Then they
you
set
need all this
precedent.
crazy access and set a precedent for
Right.
this thing. Or we have another story coming up, I think, about cyberbullying. It's like, we need to do all this stuff to track down a cyberbully.
Right.
And then later we'll just use it for everything else just because we have it now.
Juniper maybe needs to get a little warrant going, huh?
Yeah. So Juniper Networks had a partner, which was a value-added reseller that sold their hardware.
Yeah.
And that partner was caught selling beta and pre-release versions of Juniper products to Cisco.
Oh, dirty
And
play.
Cisco was then reverse engineering those products to try to blunt Juniper's market advantage.
Wow, that's...
Although
wow.
Cisco claims that they were only reverse engineering the Juniper hardware to make sure that Juniper wasn't stealing any of Cisco's IP.
Of course, that's what Cisco said. Of course. What a bunch of...
But CRN.com has a giant 5-page write-up about the story.
Yeah, they do.
And it's exactly what you would expect. The reseller had the CEO and like two of the main executives of the company had a second company up in like China. So they would buy the hardware from Juniper and then sell it to that company, and that company would sell it to Cisco. But that company has no employees except for the two people that are also the owners of the other company. And yeah, there's a bunch of lawsuits flew around on that one.
Scumbags. All around scumbags.
The interesting thing is like, yes, I understand that Cisco would reverse engineer the product, although them getting it before it's released, it was obviously a violation of the partnership agreement that Juniper had with the company that did this. But it's interesting that Cisco's allowed to reverse engineer stuff, but everybody else would be sued under the DMCA for reverse engineering stuff.
Right. Well, I guess it just depends on how big of a stick you have. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because if you're going to go up against Cisco, that's going to be a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny too. Cisco, the big dog, right? The market leader sees that other company nipping at its heels and says, "Well, let's take their product." It's almost like Cisco has
it's basically so that they could, Cisco could have a competing product out in a much shorter time.
They can't innovate on their own. What are they? They're too big to innovate now. They have to reverse engineer Juniper stuff.
Well, see, the thing is that Juniper stuff is based on FreeBSD.
Oh, that must be what it is. Must be what it is. All right,
And they couldn't figure out how they were getting Cisco couldn't figure out how they were getting their butt whipped.
Can you tell me what's going on with the cyberbullying law that supposedly the headline says it would allow Canadian police to remotely hack into computers, devices, or cars? That's the headline.
I don't actually know the details of this one. But basically, yes, they're requesting the ability to do things like this. And specifically, I think it was to track, they wanted to be able to do it into other countries in order to track cyberbullying if it was done by a member of the Canadian military that was in another country.
So it's called
ridiculous things like that.
Bill C-13. It's being studied by the House of Commons Justice Committee this week. It's described by the Conservatives as cyberbullying legislation, but will dramatically expand the reach of police, giving them the power to remotely hack into computers, mobile devices, or cars in order to track location, record, and metadata. Experts say police would be able to install viruses or malware into electronics of anyone suspected of a crime after gaining judicial approval. The bill expands the definition of tracking device and adds the concept of transmission data recorder into the criminal code. That doesn't sound good.
So basically, a transmission data recorder means an eavesdropping device.
Yeah.
You record everything you say, and then they can pick it up later.
And it says it grants police the power to use, in quotes, a computer program to do things like to use a computer program means computer data representing instructions or statements that when executed in the program system causes the computer system to perform a function. They'll be allowed to do anything that makes a computer system perform a function, basically. Yeah. Okay, I can see how they say it's hacking.
It allows the police to write malware to steal data from you and stuff, or make your computer work against you.
Think of the children, Alan. Think of the children. Got to stop the cyberbullying on Facebook. Can't just close your Facebook account. No. Got to have legislation like this.
This is what happens when you let Harper run away with things.
Hey, it's election day.
Yeah, it's provincial election, not federal.
Yeah, okay. How about this one? U.S. researchers banned for mining bitcoins using university supercomputers.
Yes, the National Science Foundation has banned some researchers from ever using supercomputers again because they were caught using the supercomputers to mine bitcoins. Apparently, they mined about $10,000 worth of bitcoins, but used about $150,000 worth of supercomputer time.
Well, so they must have been doing it all on the CPUs, huh? I guess.
Yep.
Wow.
Or they might have GPU clusters as well.
Maybe $10,000.
Most of those GPU clusters are NVIDIA based because they're better for science.
Yeah.
But they're not as good at hash cracking.
So they had to spend $150,000 of computer time to get $10,000.
Well, I don't know where they get that number. That could be also like based on
exchange rates,
wear and tear and depreciation on the hardware and stuff.
Right.
The bigger question is why. Was this only done while they were idle? If so, why are the computers idle so much? And if not, then how did somebody not notice before? It's like how much science actually got put off or slowed down by this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, why didn't anybody notice? Or maybe they did. It just took them a little bit. Okay. This one doesn't surprise me, I suppose, after working in the banking industry for a while. 14-year-olds hack an ATM using the default password that they found in a manual on the internet. Yeah, they walked up to the ATM and just put it in.
Yeah, so they downloaded the manual for the ATM off the internet and found what the default password was, which is just a 6-digit password, all numbers, because that's all that's on the keypad.
Right, yeah.
And only 6 digits. And so basically they walked up to the ATM at the Safeway, which is the grocery store, and they press some buttons and they get into the admin menu and it asks for the password. They try the default password and it works. And they play around a little bit, but they're like, well, I don't want to go to jail, so I'm going to stop here.
Right.
So they walk over to the branch of the bank and try to tell people, and at first, being bankers, the teller lady assumes that one of these kids got their PIN number stolen, and that's what they're talking about. And it's like, no. Can you imagine trying to convince the teller at your bank about a security issue?
And what I'm telling you is, I hacked your ATM, and then I walked over here and told you about it.
Piss off. It's like,
yeah.
If we were on, the weird
kid.
one was they went back to the store, and which is like, why didn't you just? Maybe it was a different ATM or something. It was like, why didn't you try the bank in the lobby? It's like the ATM in the lobby of the bank. It's like, come here, teller lady, and hack the thing in front of her and be like, see.
I think they just shoot him out of there. They're like, go on, kids, we got work to do here. You don't even have an account. Go.
So they went back to the store and got it to print out a bunch of like debugging information and details about exactly how much money was in the ATM and stuff on the little receipt paper.
And they even changed like the welcome message saying, don't use this ATM.
Go away, this ATM is hacked. And then took that to the bank, and eventually they got to talk to the bank manager, and then they found out, yes, there's a problem.
And they're not going to get in trouble.
And so what the bank manager did was wrote them a note to explain why they were late from lunch to their teacher. Rather, it's like,
How about a bug bounty?
bug bounty.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks got to give it the time, man. Otherwise,
we will set up you an educational savings plan with a chunk of money. It's like, it's only, what's the bank care about $5,000 in an education savings plan for a kid or whatever?
it's a funny
Make sure
story,
the kid goes to college instead of, plundering your ATMs. The best part was that on the hacked ATM, what they did was they changed the service charge. So if you using the ATM and you weren't a customer of that bank, instead of charging you $1.50, it would charge you 1 cent.
1 cent, yeah. Even you Canadian
That's
hackers
the
are
best
nice.
way to make the bank notice.
Even Canadian hackers, man,
their
when they
fees.
hack an ATM, they lower the fees. They go tell the people about it.
Yeah.
Canadians are like nobody else. All right, well, we can't wrap up an episode of TechSNAP without a Krebs on security blog post. And I've shopped at P.F. Chang's, not for a while, but they make some mean pot stickers, Alan, and I got to admit, I've been
P.F.
there.
Chang's is like a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah,
big chain.
yeah.
And they're apparently the latest victim in a credit card breach that started as early as March. Basically, one of those credit card superstores that sells stolen credit cards, one of the ones that was involved in the Target breach, Krebs found on there this chunk of ones from P.F. Chang's, and when he shared those with some of his contacts he knows at banks, they found that every single one of those cards was in fact used at a P.F. Chang's. And so that's most likely the source of the stolen credit cards.
Jeez Louise.
No details yet on how they stole the credit cards.
Maybe they hid them in the pot stickers. I don't know. I haven't eaten there this year, so I think I'm in the clear. But
I don't think they have them in Canada. I've never seen one.
Missed it by that much because I love P.F. Chang's. We just haven't been there in a long time. Another large credit card breach. This is a nationwide chain. You know.
And yeah, they're not sure what areas are affected yet, but it seems like it might be all of them. Which then might suggest that it was something higher up, like at the headquarters or the credit card processor, not necessarily at an individual store or something.
Right. Unless they were using the same point of sale systems that Target was.
Or something to that effect,
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us.
We'll follow that as we get more details.
Yeah, we might. Yeah. I have a
so
feeling.
far, the Secret Service is saying no comment, so we don't know yet.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Bruce will stay on the story. So we'll stay on top of Bruce, but not in a dirty way.
You mean Brian?
Brian and Bruce, I get them confused because of bees.
Yes.
It's hard, Alan.
One has a ponytail and one doesn't.
That's right. And one's going to be an action star. Yeah. And one has a ponytail. All right.
But except for Brian is the one they're actually making a movie about, not Bruce.
But Bruce has a ponytail.
Yes.
So, I mean.
He would make the better action star.
Yeah.
But Brian is the one that's getting moved.
Right. Yeah.
He's more of the, mild-mannered reporter, like literally.
Yeah. All right. If you'd like to help make our roundup even more awesome, go over to links.techsnap.tv, submit your stories. A lot of times that's where those will come from. Don't forget we want your emails. Go over to Jupiter Broadcasting, click the contact link, choose the TechSNAP show. And also, why don't you join us live? I mean, what are you, a jerk? Come on over here. Join us live. We're over at jblive.tv Thursdays, 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Boom. And you can also go to jblive.info for the audio. And now look, maybe you got like a life thing. I won't be judgy this time, so we'll also make it available for download, at least for you, just for you. You can go to Jupiter Broadcasting, subscribe to the RSS feed, get TechSNAP Weekly. There's also torrent versions. If you want to help sort of defer some of the bandwidth costs, you can grab the torrent files, and there's MP3, audio, all that kind of stuff. I mean, MP3 and video, all that kind of goodies. We love it. Also, OGG. I mean, how about that, right? Who else is getting you OGG? TechSNAP's getting you OGG. Well, go over there and enjoy it. Why don't you? All right, Alan, well, I think that brings us to the end, doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Well, you, sir, have yourself a good week. And I want to say a special thank you to all our viewers out there for joining us this week for episode 166 of the TechSNAP program. I hope we see you right back here for episode 167 next week.